Time to call the meeting to order.
I am so short.
Good evening, everybody.
Room to play. All right.
Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order now. And I'll ask the secretary to please call the roll.
Sure. Chairman Zucker,
Here.
Vice Chairwoman Balston Alvarez,
Here.
Mr. Spur,
Here?
Mr. Felmet,
Here.
Councilmember Hamlet is excused, Mr. Dalmasso,
Here.
Ms. McGee is excused, Mr. Formicelli,
Here.
Mr. Stern,
Here.
Mr. Bell is excused, Ms. Bowen. Here. You have a quorum. You may proceed.
Thank you. This is time for the adequate notice statement. In accordance with New Jersey Statute 10:4-10, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to a newspaper of record and has been posted here in City Hall. Please be advised, this is a no-smoking building. Fire exits are to my right, your left, and the back of the room. This is a scheduled meeting of the Planning Board. There may be other meetings currently running simultaneous with this meeting. If you're not here for the Summit Planning Board, your meeting may be upstairs or elsewhere in the building. At this time, we can stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to make a small change to the agenda and move the minutes up to the beginning of the meeting for reasons that'll be apparent later. So at this time, I'd like to ask if anyone has any comments or additions or changes to the minutes from last meeting. Hearing none, I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Seconded. Thank you.
All those in favor?
Yes?
Any opposed? The motion carries.
All right, thank you. First on our agenda is a public hearing. The Reeves Arboretum is proposing to construct an accessibility ramp. And I'll ask the applicant to come forward at this time.
Where
Oh,
you're
sorry,
going,
Mr.
I'm
Spur.
going to recuse from this application.
Mr. Spur is recused.
Good evening. My name is Jackie Condell. I'm the executive director over at Reeves Arboretum. And the plan that we are putting forward, as Chairman Zucker mentioned, is we're looking to put in an accessible path. Right now, we have about 2/3 of a loop that makes its way around through the gardens. This last piece will be joining the existing accessible path. Will carry everybody through our historic gardens and back up to the parking lot. So it'll make most of the core grounds available and accessible to people of all abilities. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may ask a question or two quickly?
Please.
Can you please repeat your name?
Oh, sure.
And your association with the Arboretum?
It's Jackie Condell, Kondel, and I'm the executive director at Reeves Arboretum.
Thank you. And if, Mr. Chairman, just to remind the board, this is and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Burgess, a master plan consistency review. Correct?
That is correct.
And as such, it is not technically a public hearing, as it is not an application for development. So I need not swear in any witnesses. I didn't want anyone to think I forgot to swear in Ms. Condon. I didn't. And the primary issue, of course, is whether or not this is consistent with the master plan or not inconsistent with the master plan. This particular capital project proposal, as Mr. Burgess set forth in his memo of November 18. Nevertheless, we do have certain recommendations and what have you, and certainly all information pertinent to the application would be pertinent to the board's discretion, particularly since the applicable provision allows not only for master plan consistency review, but also any other recommendations, I may be paraphrasing a little bit off, that the board wishes to make with respect to the proposal. I'm done
Thank
for
you.
now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Mr. Burgess, would you like to take us through your memo?
Very briefly, we had prepared a report dated November 18th, and it's been indicated this is a consistency review. I know the board's familiar with that process. The most significant modification to the plan, and it's a minor one, is that the lot coverage is only being increased from 5.02 to 5.5%, whereas the code permits up to 30% coverage, so they're not even coming remotely close to the maximum. With respect to the consistency review, we typically look at the goals and objectives of the master plan. And as we note in our report, there's a number of the goals from the master plan and a subsequent reexamination report that are being affirmed by this application. One goal talks about maintaining and upgrading the availability of community resources, and amongst the things it does list recreational facilities. Another goal talks about encouraging a balanced development pattern that serves to improve the city's overall quality of life, and certainly for the handicapped, that is true in this instance. Other goals talk about encouraging a more desirable visual environment, providing an effective array of recreational and cultural facilities for all segments of the community. And beyond all that, there's an acknowledgement that this is a historic site and is designated as such in the master plan, as well as the national and state registers of historic places. So having said all of that, it's clear that it is consistent with the master plan. Your obligation is not to enter my phone. Your obligation is to report back to the governing body to identify whether or not you agree with the suggestions in our report, and then they will take the application from there and make the final formal determination with respect to consistency.
Thank you very much. Although, at first blush, I think that although the zone may allow for 30% lot coverage, I don't think an arboretum would be a place we would want 30% lot coverage.
That
So
is true.
I'm glad we're safely below that level. Does anyone have any comments or questions about,
Mr. Burgess's report? No.
all right, any other comments? Does anyone like to take us through the plan any further, or?
Mr. Chairman, before we proceed, there are a couple of recommendations from the various staff members.
Oh,
Right,
yes,
but why don't we
yes.
listen, if you want to listen to their presentation on
Oh,
the
I'm sorry, I
drawings
thought,
first?
I didn't know how much for, sure, at the appropriate time. I
Is there-
didn't know where they were in the process.
It's up to you where you.
I was
where-
just going to say, I'm going to introduce our landscape architect, Jarrett Cass, who will walk you through the plans.
Just going to load up my computer here. Just a brief presentation.
Again, your name and business address for the record?
My name is Jarrett Kest. I'm a licensed landscape architect in New Jersey.
And while it's a master plan consistency review, your license in New Jersey is in good standing, and you've been accepted as an expert landscape architect in the past?
That is correct, yeah.
Thank you. Refer to the chair.
We can accept Mr. Cass as an expert.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm just going to walk you through some visuals that we put together for the project.
Would it help if we just mark the entirety of the PowerPoint as Exhibit A1 for reference purposes and for the resolution that'll be drafted? If, unless we just do a letter.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Great, thank you.
We'll refer to the PowerPoint as A1. Thank you.
So our firm, which is J. Keston Company, we've been in Summit for the last 10 years. We reside over the Summit House on Springfield Ave, up until very recently where we just moved. So we're very familiar with the area and have presented in front of the board several times, zoning board mostly, planning board a few times. So we were hired by the Reeves Reed Arboretum more than 2 years ago to help them develop a plan to make the Arboretum more accessible. So we explored several options, also being mindful that it is an Arboretum, how do we keep this, as green as possible? And the phrase that came up most of the time is with, the lightest touch possible, right? So what we're going to show you here today, or what I'm going to show you here today, are some 3D renderings of the proposed design that support the construction plans that we submitted for your review. So this is a Google Earth image of the existing property. You can see the amphitheater and the series of gardens. Currently, about 2/3 of it is not accessible by wheelchair or any kind of, mobility challenged person. So our goal was to connect a loop, which is existing. On the left side of the image, you'll see asphalt, which is a pervious pathway, which is an accessible path, which takes you all the way down to the amphitheater. And we want to continue that loop all the way up to the parking area, which is basically the entrance to the Arboretum. This is the proposed area for that transition of grade. We have about 7.5 feet of vertical grade that we have to navigate. So, which is quite a bit when it comes to, meeting ADA requirements and so on. Happy to report that we were able to do that, I think, gracefully and elegantly, and still being mindful that it is an arboretum, that we didn't want it to end up looking like a series of ramps that you might find in an institutional type setting. So garden-like is really what we were going for. This is the plan you have in front of you. Just going to quickly move to the next slide since you have that in front of you. So project rendering number 1 is a bird's eye view looking down at what you'll see as the accessible ramp with a beautiful rock garden staircase moving through lush landscaping. And at the bottom of the slide, you'll see a curvilinear ramp, which, is a 6 foot wide and certainly able for someone to be going down the ramp in a wheelchair, but also having someone else walking side by side. So the idea is that it's comfortable, it doesn't feel different than any other walkway, and it has opportunities for rest. A little bit closer in view, you'll see that beautiful staircase in the middle, places to rest. So there's multiple ways to navigate those 7.5 feet. We're enhancing the upper area, which currently exists, so it'll be a better place for tables and chairs, but it also opens up the vista of the great lawn at the Arboretum. So this, we believe, is one of the best views on the property, and it's enhanced through this project. A further zoomed out view, you'll see the azalea garden centered in the image there. In the lower left, you'll see the other gardens where we are adding at-grade walkways. So these will be pervious pavement, meaning water will percolate through that pavement, which is matching what is existing out there. So all of the at-grade walkways will match what is currently out there, which is pervious pavement. The constructed ramps will be exposed aggregate concrete, and that's mostly for maintenance reasons. It's highly durable, but it also has an aesthetically appealing look to it. So it has decorative cobbles on the surface of a durable concrete surface. And one more view here. Looking down, you can see the 6 foot wide path, which is the exposed aggregate pavement I was just mentioning. And we have these beautiful wrought iron railings, which also match, the aesthetic present on the property. In the end, our goal is for a visitor of this property to not know what we did here, right? We want it to look homogeneous with the existing architecture, with the landscape and so on. So we've worked closely with the staff and the board over this more than 2-year period to make sure we get every detail just right. And that we're also providing, not only just a way to navigate 7.5 feet, but we are providing a beautiful garden experience for a visitor of the Arboretum. Last two slides, this is the upper patio. Visitor center is off to the right, and you can see this vista being opened up to the lower Great Lawn. And then another beautiful addition to this area is the area in front of the greenhouse, which currently is not accessible. So right next to the accessible parking spaces, you can come right into the greenhouse very easily, and there's also an outdoor classroom with an information kiosk guiding you through the project and through the property. And with that, that is the end of our presentation. I'll open it to any questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the board for Mr. Kessler?
Yeah. I have a question.
Please.
The construction office, and I did not drill down on this, was asking about lighting. Lighting for is it low and probably in there, but I didn't.
Yeah, so we are matching the lantern standard that is currently on the property. So we have, I think, 9 or 10, I think it's 10 total lanterns. So it's a vintage, style lantern with a candelabra on a cedar post, which is throughout the property currently, so it'll be the exact same standard. It has a shielded top, so it doesn't have the glass top that is an option, and that keeps the kind of the night sky under consideration.
Right. And there are no variances required
No.
for the retaining walls or anything like that? Okay.
No, there's one retaining wall that's 5 feet 8 inches or 5.8 inches. Feet.
Yeah,
But it's under the 6 feet that's permitted.
Right.
Okay.
Retaining walls are okay, but the construction office also asked about if there are any areas that, they just wanted to make sure that there weren't any retaining walls that were built that didn't have a
guardrails.
guardrail or something.
Yeah,
following
so, I can answer his, comments, and they're all pretty standard things. So the walls, in some cases, not all, are greater than 4 feet, which do require a submittal to the building official and for review, and we've known that all along, so they all are structurally engineered walls. And any wall greater than 30 inches does have a 42-inch high guardrail that meets all building code requirements.
Okay.
That's all I had.
Well, great. Terrific. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's a phenomenal, I think it's a phenomenal design. Fits with the historic building, the historic site setting. It's really well done,
And I don't think there's any question that it advances the interests of the master plan
right?
and is not inconsistent with it. Am I correct, Mr. Warner?
It's not inconsistent,
That is our favorite double negative.
We like double negatives here.
quite consistent.
At that point, can we go to Mr. Warner, a vote to?
Yeah,
You have
I
any-
guess the only thing might be the city engineer's report, just to confirm consistency with the 11 items there, if the board so desires.
I didn't get a copy of that.
I can comment on that.
I think it's dated, oh, no, I don't want to state the date.
Yeah, I didn't get it.
Yeah,
That's a
I
due date.
emailed it because they gave it to me a little late.
Oh, okay, I missed
Oh, it
that
came
one
a little
then,
late?
'cause I printed out all the other things. Oh, okay.
And it might be, Mr. Chairman, simple enough as to, if the answer is will comply with the 11 items, that might be simple enough.
It's just,
It is that simple. I actually spoke with Aaron Schrager this afternoon, and we went through those items, and it is all that actually simple. It's just a couple of calculations that he's looking for on the plan, some invert elevations, and showing him that the cistern that we're proposing is the right size for the impervious that we are creating.
All right, very good, thank you. So with that in mind, anything else, Mr. Burgess?
The only thing I want to say, I got to compliment you on your presentation. The drawings are really impressive.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Great, so I'll take a motion that we would find that the plaintiff's application is not inconsistent with the master plan, and we would recommend that to the council.
Okay, and I'll just assume, unless I'm told otherwise, that all the recommendations that were made in the reports that were stipulated to by the applicant would go along with that consistency finding.
Yeah, we plan to comply with all the comments.
All right, thank you very much. Do I have a motion?
So moved?
Thank you. And a second? Second. Thank you. And a vote?
Sure. Chairman Zucker,
Yes.
Vice Chairwoman Boston Alvarez.
Yes.
Mr. Felmet,
Yes.
Mr. Del Masso,
Yes.
Mr. Formicelli,
Yes.
Mr. Stern,
Yes.
Ms. Bowen.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Thank you very much. We should invite Mr. Spur back into the room, wherever he is hiding. I'd also like to thank Mr. Warner for sending around at the end of October, if you haven't noticed, a compliance deadline sheet for the various issues we'll be dealing with. If you guys haven't seen it, if you didn't notice it in your emails. Thank you.
My pleasure. It's, those
Thank you.
deadlines are, as they're saying, baked in the statute. So,
Good.
we know, you want me to find Mr. Spur?
Yeah, if you don't mind. Thanks.
Have a good Thanksgiving.
You too. So what are we doing next? Resolution.
Yeah, next up. Oh, memorializing the Summit Community Programs, that would be the lacrosse wall.
Yeah. They're making themselves they say it's concrete, and then over here it's cinder block. I think the drawings say it's concrete that's parged. Then I think they might have testified that it was cinder block, which means it should be painted, because it's just gray cinder block. not okay. So we just need to verify and then make it consistent, and also that it's not just concrete, it's brick-faced on three sides.
That's true.
So we need to just.
Okay, let's do that. All right, next up.
remembers.
Next up is a review of the resolution for memorialization on the lacrosse wall. The resolution was circulated earlier for our comments and analysis, and I believe we have at least one comment from the board already. So, Ms. Balzan-Alvarez, did you want to?
Yeah, do you all remember, I think, there was, on the drawings, it said that it was gonna be a concrete wall with the brick face on three sides and the concrete on the one side parged. But then, did they testify there was gonna be cinder block after all? Didn't they say that? Because in the resolution, we have concrete, and then we have cinder block in another section, and I'm trying to remember, what is it actually being built out of, and wanna make it consistent.
That's a question to us. Do we recall how?
Do we recall whether? I feel like it was on the drawings as concrete. Yeah,
They said it used to be brick and then they changed it, they were standing right there.
Yeah.
And they said now it's gonna be cinder block, or blocks.
right. I think you're right. I think on the drawing it showed concrete, and they changed the scope to cinder block, but they're still facing it on three sides with brick, on the pergola side.
Right.
Okay, so let's just make it all say concrete block. I think we should say painted concrete block or parged concrete block. I'm not sure which, because on the drawing, it was concrete that was parged. Now it's cinder block, presumably also to be parged, or else it'll not be as attractive for the neighbors.
I'm going to need to know
Okay,
what,
so I'll tell
where
you
you
what to say.
land.
All right. So on page 2,
Yes.
number 2, partway down, it says the proposed wall itself would be constructed, rather than concrete, you would say concrete,
Shuffle
or
closer to the-
parged concrete, and then faced on
I'm sorry,
3
what-
sides with
I-
brick.
Why am I missing where it says concrete? I haven't gotten there yet.
It says,
Oh, three-quarter, there we are.
Yeah.
Also constructed of concrete, okay.
so it says construction of concrete, but we all remember that
It
it was.
changed, okay.
It was actually gonna be constructed of cinder block.
Cinder block, okay.
So I think you should say parged cinder block. and then faced on 3 sides with brick. And then that's an accurate record of what they're actually building.
Size, okay. Got that, and, does it need to change in any other spaces
Yeah,
that
there's
use
a
those
concrete, there's a correct cinder block mentioned
later on?
later on page 5. Because there would be constructed out of cinder block. I don't think we have to describe it again, though, do we?
No, I
I think
don't.
once we said it correctly.
It's a
once-
factual finding,
Then
and the
that's right.
plan would dictate anyway.
Yeah, but the plan's wrong. It says concrete. It
Okay.
says like poured with
Yeah, it's
rebar and all that.
It's inconsistently referred to. right?
Sorry?
It's inconsistently referred to.
Yeah.
Inconsistent.
So we need to write it consistent at least.
Right, so we have it cinder block on page 5, and
At the bottom, number 12. We trust you to fix that.
Yep. We'll go,
If it's
we'll go
anywhere
through and
else.
make sure it's cinder block throughout.
Now, I have one other
Yeah.
point, unless we're, one other thing that seemed inconsistent to me was the actual ground coverage, in terms of the footage and the materials, and so I think we should at least try to,
Double check.
again, double check that and be consistent on that. Because depending upon the moment in the conversation we were at last time, if anybody remembers,
Right.
there was anywhere from, I'm gonna get the exact number wrong, 1,000 feet of covered with pavement to 3,600 square feet of pavement, which is a radical
That's right.
difference.
Yeah, yeah.
And what that was covered with was also not consistently answered there. And while none of us, including myself, incredibly pushed back on that, I was left with the impression that anything could happen.
I think it's gonna be paved within the fence line, right?
Well, but it wasn't said that it was gonna be that way at the beginning of.
Right.
It was like,
Right.
it was implied that it was a small portion for that, and then the rest would probably be turf or something like that. But then that,
I wish I brought the drawing.
So
Still
you want
had that.
confirmation of the ultimate square footage and the material,
we want
Of the
ultimate, we want
impervious.
confirmation on the ultimate square footage of the entire area.
Right.
Not with regards to what necessarily is covered, but just what is that? I think
Right.
it was a 60 by 60 space, if I remember correctly. And then within that, what is where? Is it, I'm making up numbers, is it 500 square feet? Is it 1,000 square feet? Is it 1,500 square feet of a hard surface that they would bounce the ball off, which was implied would be closest to the wall?
We talked about,
and
we
then-
said, shouldn't it be turf? And then like, we actually get a truer bounce off of concrete.
yeah.
Right, but do you need to do that bounce from
I
30,
don't- yeah.
35, 40 feet away, or is it 5 feet away?
Yeah,
Yeah, and so all that never really came together in a way
Okay. Mm.
There's
that's clear.
our engineer.
Okay, so can we,
I have one other. comment.
yeah,
They said it was gonna be, like, on page 11, on the timing, when it was gonna be open or available for use, it was gonna be at some point during the hours of the day that it was light out. This says 7 AM to 10 PM, I don't know that.
Yeah.
10
That's
PM
not
is
what
light out.
that's not what we discussed.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and thank you, that
and
is,
7, page 7.
right, no, I'm with you. That was tied to the DEP noise ordinance, which is our noise
Right.
ordinance as well. However, we can make it earlier based on their stipulation.
I
That's
remember we
a,
said something like sun up to sundown, and like, well, sun up's through.
That's right.
Right.
And so then somebody, I think,
Exactly.
said, why don't we use our noise ordinance, which is a good one, and I think that starts at 8, not 7.
oh, okay, well, then we're ahead of the DEP, but that's all right. We can make it 8 PM.
But
8 AM.
I'm sorry.
8 a.m.
8 AM, I'm sorry.
To sunset.
Well, actually,
But
okay.
it's not lit, right? I mean, it doesn't,
There's a.
I mean,
a
there's-
little lighting
there's
on the
decorative
gazebo
lighting.
side,
There's
I believe,
decorative
who
lighting,
knows
but
what could
not-
appear.
And the nighttime,
And who knows what
what
happens with the other lights?
you said
They
sunset.
may not
Yes.
have that
Exactly.
power.
what time do you
Maybe
want,
lighted.
what time do you want the pro?
Indirectly, but in a significant way.
I'm sorry. what were
That's
you saying
okay, that's all
before?
right, we'll get there. What time would you like between the hours of what and 8 AM? Because
should
nighttime
probably
is
be
different during
consistent.
the
Well,
year.
I was looking before, the latest sunset is like 8:30, so however long, I mean, it doesn't get dark immediately, but.
9 PM to 8 AM?
I think, well, so if the latest in the summer sunset is 8:30, it should probably be 8:30. 9 o'clock implies to me, that there's going to be lighting installed at some point. Where if you look at some like the high schooler, actually, you know what, if you go to the Jefferson baseball field, since I was involved with baseball for many years, the rule was always that that light had to be out at 9:30. And if it wasn't lit, then you had to be done at sunset. That was sort of the rule for how baseball.
We-
And
we-
I would imagine a similar thing would probably apply if there
Yeah.
was lighting or if there wasn't.
You want to, let me know what you want.
So
Eight to eight, you-
I think sunset is the answer, right? So that, in the
Why did
winter,
we said
that's
that
4:30.
before, but why did we decide not to do sunset? I don't remember why. Maybe because of,
So they said, sun up to sundown, or we said that,
We
and they're
said
like, well,
that.
sun up is too early. We'll
Yeah.
come up with something.
so why don't we do 8 AM to sunset?
Yeah.
If that's what everybody sounds like they wanna do.
Seems to make sense.
Suns, okay.
No, we might
Between
get
the
them
hours,
pull up
it'll
their
be
car,
prohibited between the
leave it
hours of
on, you know, so they can.
sunset to 8 AM.
Sunset to 8 AM, yeah. Prohibited from sunset to 8 AM.
Per the signage.
That's easy enough, because there's no light, so.
Yeah, and it's on 7 and 11, at least.
Yep, no, I got it on both pages. As far as the arguable vagueness left for the time being with respect to the square footage, et cetera, it's up to the board's comfort level as to whether you wish to adopt the resolution and entrust me with the additional modifications, or if you wish to see it again after those modifications. I think it's within the discretion of the board. It's somewhat vague, but
anyone
not
like to
too
see this
vague.
It's a
again?
consistency review, so.
Does anyone want to see
Well,
this?
yeah, yeah, it's a reasonableness review, and it's not an application for development.
I think we trust you.
There you go. I'll take it, thank you.
I agree,
So then with those changes,
yeah.
Okay.
do we have a motion?
To memorialize, right. Do we have a motion to memorialize with these changes? I'll take a motion from anyone.
A motion.
Thank you, Mr. Momentali. And a second?
Second.
Okay, I'm going to take Vice Chair Balsan Alvarez as the second. So our eligible voting members for this are Chairman Zucker, Vice Chairwoman Balsan Alvarez, Mr. Spur, Mr. Felmett, Councilmember Hamlet, Mr. Dalmasso, Ms. McGee, Mr. Formicelli, and Mr. Stern. So we have our motion and our second, so I'll do the roll call. Chairman Zucker,
Yes.
Vice Chairwoman Balsan Alvarez.
Yes.
Mr. Spur,
Yes.
Mr. Felmett,
Yes.
Mr. Dalmasso,
Yes.
Mr. Formicelli,
Yes.
Mr. Stern.
Yes.
The motion carries.
All right, thank you. There's another item that's not on our agenda, but the draft ordinance updates were circulated.
Yes.
So I'd like to go through with everyone and see if these capture the agreements that we reached. So I hope everyone's had a chance to look through. We spent enough time on it. I do want to stop for a second, actually. Mr. Damaso, am I correct that you have some insight, a little bit about a recent ordinance discussion about accessory units? Or is that not something you want to talk about, or am I off base?
Yes, as many people know, the League of Municipalities was last week, and they had a very informative seminar on accessory dwelling units, of which I was one of the few in Summit, or the only one from Summit to attend. So I took down some notes. I can share offhand, but, at the end of the day, as Mr. Warner would say, it's written in the policy. You got to look there first. But yes, I can provide some insight.
No, I think we'd all be interested to know, because we're also, I noticed that we're still starting to talk about it in our DRO, but it sounds like we may be preempted, or there may be something.
Well, it's, the state policy is going to be entirely opt-in. So you either adopt the state model, of which there will be two options of a model to adopt, or you do not. If you do not adopt either of their models, accessory dwelling units become illegal in your city, and you cannot have an accessory dwelling unit, according to state law.
Can you adopt them at any point?
You can adopt it at any point, that is correct. And there are various ramifications to it. For example, as was stated if you do adopt one of the models for accessory dwelling units, the zoning requirements tied to accessory dwelling units or would be dictated solely by the state law or model adopted and not the local zoning ordinance. So for instance, an accessory dwelling unit would only have a minimum side yard or rear yard setback requirement of 5 feet, independent of what the municipality's zoning ordinance may say. So there's a lot of items as such. Another example is that if, let's say you have a multifamily home and you can designate either an attic apartment or basement apartment, which Summit currently does not permit, I believe, you could designate one of those or an attic as an ADU if it meets a minimum height requirement per the state model, and the city would be forced to adopt that accessory dwelling unit either in a basement or attic, regardless of what our zoning might say. So the models are quite an imposition and require a more refined eye, and these are just the things I remember off the top of my head.
So you can't have your own version. You
You
have to
cannot.
either adopt theirs or not have.
And so
Precisely.
And so anything we currently have in the books becomes illegal? Or is it
Yes,
grandfathered?
and no, it is
And-
not permitted. Your ordinance version needs to be approved by the county commissioner's office, and then it is informed to the enforcing body of the state that we have a valid ordinance.
Got it.
We cannot just
So it's
have
gotta be
our own.
It's got to be consistent with
Right.
theirs. Yeah, but I'm saying if we have one now that is non-conforming, or if we don't adopt it, do they have to vacate it?
They would.
Oh,
It would not be valid.
they'd be
Completely invalid.
blanketly illegal in
Yes.
town. Got it.
Yes.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Damas, this is, correct me if I'm wrong, is this a bill, but not yet enacted, but it's a pilot program in certain municipalities, if I recall correctly?
That is correct. It is a bill for proposal. Some towns, the model that they were closely based off of was Princeton, and I can't remember what the second model was based from, but Princeton already has a robust ADU policy, and they allow, it helps them shape their community, works for them. Not say I'm entirely convinced for the city of Summit, but it would be quite an imposition if we were to have one.
And if I may, from the legal perspective, since it is not yet enacted as the law, should you so desire to proceed with recommendation, I defer to our planner on that, but from that perspective, but should you so decide to go forward with the recommendation with respect to accessory dwelling units, there's nothing prohibiting you, at least as of yet.
Right.
And if and when that particular statute were enacted, which it very well may be, it's a pilot program in some places, so it's not pie in the sky necessarily, but then no harm, no foul, the ordinance would have to be amended and to be compliant, and the existing ordinance effectively would be vacated. But this is something that might happen in
No, we
the
understand.
future.
No.
Yeah, we understand.
Just a bill.
We appreciate the summary. Thank
We
you.
have no obligation to accept either.
Right.
Right.
Joe, do you have any thoughts on
No, I
that?
think between the two of them, they summarized everything very well. I also want to talk a little bit about some things that took place at the league, but we could do that after we finish.
Okay, all right, so let's just, thank you for that. Sorry for the interruption, but
Right.
I thought it was interesting. Okay, so going through, does anyone have any comments on the drafts as they currently exist?
And I have one or two comments on the draft as well.
Okay.
Do you?
And that's primarily because Tom could not read my handwriting.
Oh, do you want to give us your edits first?
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, why don't you give us yours first?
Okay. On page 3, my notes do reflect, irrespective of Tom's inability to understand my handwriting, that on section 3514 1J1, line 1,
Yeah.
2, 3, line 4, where it says from view of a public street, there was a general agreement that the words or from surrounding properties at grade were to be deleted.
That's be deleted, right?
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
And
So from the
then,
or on is deleted.
Correct.
correct.
Got
And
it.
then on the last, second to last, the last paragraph, under 3514-1J4E, existing air conditioning units, and then we are to insert on residentially developed lots.
That's what I had. Okay, good.
And then it continues, and then on the second to last line where it says, subject to, the words all other development and was to be deleted as well.
I'm sorry. say
Subject
that
to
again.
building code requirements, including.
Correct.
And just take out all other development, because that was too vague, right?
All other development and gets deleted.
Okay, subject to building code requirements, blah, blah, blah. And you're putting the on residential or in residential zones right after, existing air conditioning units?
The wording that was agreed upon was on residentially developed lots.
Okay, that works.
And I think the only other item was the parking standard for daycare centers.
Yeah,
There are two standards in the ITE parking generation handbook that we were looking at. Tom included the one that related to staff. And
right.
primarily because the current ordinance talked about staff. I thought there was actually a different and better standard and easier to work with because the number of employees can always change. But ITE also uses a standard of 3.75 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of floor area, which is much more manageable, easier for this.
Oh, yes, much more predictable. Yeah.
Yes, so I would suggest we consider that.
I was gonna ask you that, because why would, yeah, that's good. And I also like that it's square feet rather than classroom, because that's another way of doing it. And classroom, you know,
Could be any sort of size.
they,
depending.
well, that's not a classroom, and that's not a classroom, and that's not, but it's all school, like, okay. yeah.
Right.
So
And then they
there's
become
monkey
classrooms
business with
anyway, so.
Does the 3.75 round up in practice?
Actually, I rounded it up from 3.74. What was interesting, in the ITE handbook, they tell you how many studies were done for different things.
Okay.
And here, it was either 45 or 47 different studies, so it was a decent number, because it's just as a quick aside, when anybody ever quotes the ITE handbook, always ask, well, how many studies was that based on? Because sometimes there's only one or two studies that are, the basis for a.
Yeah, nationally, and who knows the size.
Yeah, and one
of
could be
Right.
in rural
So-
Iowa.
Right,
and,
right.
God
How
knows
relevant is
where.
it?
And I'll
Right.
say anecdotally from my experience on the commercial side is often with an office building, it'll be 4 spots per 1,000 as sort of rule of thumb
Mhm.
for that. So anything in that range sounds about right to me.
Yeah, but this, with either 45 or 47, and it said, and this was in just urban/suburban communities, which I think something kind of fits that bill. So that's why I was very comfortable in that. 374 just sounded odd.
I mean,
as
that
a
might air a
standard.
little light, because some people are walkers if it's urban, so. do
No,
we-
but
yours
I'm
is
talking
4,
about not non-super dense urban, but like suburban.
or like here.
Like if you went to any of the offices on the perimeter of town, I would suspect that they're parking
I mean, would we be,
No, but
would we be
Jennifer?
considered too conservative or arbitrary if we said 4 per Mr. Formicelli?
Well, no, the term urban, suburban is defined as something like a summit. It's a suburban community with some urban
Okay,
characteristic to
so you're
it.
comfortable?
Yes.
You think we'll be
mhm,
okay? We won't have like our last,
Yes. And then lastly, you had asked, or I wasn't sure if somebody raised a question, well, should we put pictures of the porte cochere in the ordinance? And I wasn't sure, in my note, I had a question mark, and I wasn't
I
sure if
don't
that
remember
was
that.
a specific directive, or there was just discussion, and there was no discussion about that as to whether or not.
I'm not so sure it's useful only in the sense that we're saying that it's a covered area, but it's not meant to be a covered parking spot. But if you show a picture of it, it could be a covered parking spot. I mean, it doesn't really, a picture
Well,
doesn't.
there's a cover, but the impervious, it's open on 3 sides, obviously. And that's why there's a distinction that most ordinances will use when they talk about portico shares.
And they don't tend to be a full car length
Yeah, I guess that's true.
long, really. They're carriage length
Is
long.
it, yeah, is it four spaced?
Floor space, yes.
You could have a portico share that's 4 spaces long, yeah.
It can be as high as 12 hands.
Yeah, 12 hands.
Exactly. I did have a couple of it. Does anybody else have edits you want to share?
Go ahead.
You got a couple of them. I think on page 3, you want to, when you're describing what you're doing, you're underlining the additions, and the deletions are crossed out, not bracketed. So you probably want to do a cross out and a line through it, thus. Because that's what we did.
Yeah, if the final product will show that.
Yeah. And at the top of 3, I don't know if this is necessary or if this is understood, but where it says, in residential zones, no accessory building or structure with a roof shall have a floor or ground area in excess of 576 square feet, nor shall any dimension be longer than 24 feet. I put any plan dimension, or, you know, it's the footprint that we're talking about, or a wall length. But then after that, in the ordinance, they talk about height. So maybe it's just covered, like, maybe it's not a problem.
I think it is, but
Okay,
I'll leave that.
so never mind.
Okay.
You added residential to the air conditioner thing. On page 4, flat roofs are prohibited above the uppermost floor of a single or 2-story dwelling. I actually think
Two-family.
on makes sense to me, because I feel like above might infer like another something up, you know, up there. Isn't the roof on the floor, on that floor? But what do you
No.
guys think, on or above?
I
for
think
that?
it's above. I think the roof is above.
Do you want to say atop?
Yeah. I don't
Atop the uppermost floor?
If it makes sense for everybody, that's fine. Oh, and I thought that number 2 under roofs, it might be clearer if we just wrote where 50% or more of the existing roofs on existing dwellings with pitches less than 6.5 feet. Rather than trying to say it backwards. Did I read that wrong? No. Where 50% or more of the roof framing, sorry, I read it wrong. Where 50% or more of the roof framing has been removed, the reconstructed roof shall have a minimum roof pitch of 6 to 12. I just thought it was confusing because
the roof
why do you
framing
have to
more
say or removed entirely if you're doing more than 50%, if more than 50% is removed? So I'm trying to just simplify it.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
So
maybe
where
maybe the
50%
word
or more.
reconstructed
Right.
on that last clause just needs to be substituted with repaired.
Where 50% or where the roof framing
Or
has
we don't
been
need removed
removed.
entirely, because if it's over 50%.
Right.
Cross
includes
that out.
entire.
Right.
Has
Exactly.
been removed.
So if you just say where 50% or more of the roof framing has been removed, the reconstructed roof shall have a minimum roof pitch of.
Well, you just changed it, because you're saying 50% or more. I know it's silly, but, and this says we're more than 50%.
Right,
Meaning
but
that-
I just got, why I started to fix it was just because, or removed entirely, got me.
Well, no, because it's not, you should say removed or removed entirely, because it says 50% is just 50%. And so the removed entirely is the greater, I think.
Mm.
I think that's the intent. anyway.
That's the intent, yeah.
Yes.
Even if it's.
That's why 50% or more, if it's gone, you've got to comply. That's basically what I'm saying.
Or you
So
could
there's
say
no monkey.
where
Yeah.
minimally 50%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go.
Okay. And on section 5, we just have to change attachment 1 to appendix A. Because that's where that's.
The design guidelines are
I'm
appendix.
sorry,
A.
what was that, Jennifer?
Section 5, just below, it's appendix A,
Not attachment 1.
yeah. So we're defining the Porco share, but are we now saying it's not they don't need to come for a variance for it now? Because we're defining it? Before they had to come because it was clumped in with a carport? So is that what that does?
In terms of coverage,
No, in terms of building one.
Yeah, it
In
used to be
terms of-
precluded. Chris, way back, the zoning officer, just like carports, Porco shares, I don't care what you call it, they're not allowed, they have to get a variance. And I guess she, had her reasons. There must have been some really bad ones out there in town.
I had been under the impression you wanted to allow it.
Yes.
And acknowledge the fact that it's not intended as additional covered, a covered parking
Yeah.
area.
I
That's
thought
why
it
we,
wasn't really worth it because it came up so, after we discussed it, I thought it was an interesting question, but maybe doesn't come up enough, kind of like the dormer to bother with, but it's a nice definition.
I think we're going with it, and,
Okay,
yeah,
so it means that
it'll be allowed.
it'll be allowed.
yeah.
The only thing that we had discussed that's not in there is that the Porco shares historically, they have the same materials, the same style. They're really part of the design and it
We can-
matches.
We can certainly add that, that's,
So
That'd
that's
be
what
good,
kind of
yeah.
different, carport usually is metal poles and doesn't look like the building often.
you know.
Okay, design consistency, right.
I'll have something like design consistent with the overall character of the front facade.
Yes.
I'll work on that a little bit.
Design and materials is what I had in my notes. I don't have anything else. Do you have anything?
I think that covers it.
The one other thing I did want to bring up, somebody had asked about on the rooftop,
Entertainment space or whatever.
I was going to say bar issue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, right.
And somebody specifically said, well, Hoboken has a number of regulatory controls, and they do. They have all sorts of time differences. For example, you're allowed, they start as early as 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. on Sundays and Wednesdays, and Thursday through Saturday is 8 a.m. to midnight. I'll leave it up to you. I thought 8 a.m. was a little early. I'm used to being on those things at night, not for breakfast, but they also have,
What's the difference?
they allow live acoustic music limited to specific hours, 4 to 10 p.m., except on Saturdays and Sundays when it's noon to 10 p.m. They allow they prohibit anything but muted TVs or video screens. So
Muted.
They must be muted, and of course, no flashing or moving lights. I didn't want to start putting all that in an ordinance until I got your sense that that's what you were looking for.
I'm concerned with some of those apartments,
Those sound generally reasonable to me, but it's a dense area but our CRBD is sort of dense, and if there was more residential like a Hoboken, suddenly all these things become very important to
Yeah,
the surrounding buildings.
yeah. Have your mic.
The one thing it did not have, and it was the big topic of conversation at the last meeting, was a limit on seats. In the initial draft, we had 20 seats. Hoboken and some others that I looked at had no limitation on seats. I know a couple places that I go to, they don't have that many seats, but they have areas where you could stand next to a bar around the whole perimeter of the space.
Right.
And-
But there's a fire marshal rule,
Isn't there a
like
fire-
how many people you can get out of there,
Well,
so
yeah,
there
but-
will be some max.
Well, that's it. I honestly think, and maybe it's just me, that our conversation about seats and things was our attempt at thinking about noise control and crowd control. Hoboken chooses to do it by muting the televisions and not caring how loud the people talk, or, making sure they have acoustic music and not amplified music. All these things are fine. I mean, maybe we shouldn't second guess and try to control things with seats. If people want to have an entertainment space, let the fire marshal control the, what's safe up there. So I'm okay with if people are open
So
to
add-
not being too strict on these things.
Okay, add these kind of these provisions, but delete the seating capacity. Because you're right, it will be the fire marshal in the end that can.
Yeah, I don't think we have to guess the seat
As
restrictions.
long as that's enforced, that the fire marshal code, then I think we're in pretty good shape.
So, yeah, I would recommend that, if we're okay.
I just worry about, light pollution
And
and,
that's in there.
Noise.
Yeah, that's in there too.
Yeah.
That was-
But even television screens, I mean, they can just be angled to aim into the entertainment space. I mean, it doesn't have to be, a side projected movie to the neighborhood.
Right. Because we still want to encourage residential on upper floors in our downtown,
I keep going back to the new hotel, just because that is in a residential neighborhood. And I'm wondering if they are going to do a roof deck, this is where this really matters a lot, I just think.
Well, you could limit it to
Yeah.
certain districts and
Yeah.
areas.
See,
They they have a lot of great specificity, and they identify certain specific redevelopment areas where they permit it.
Right.
And they named them. They also have other regulatory controls, and it was clearly for specific things that are even going on in lower Manhattan, where they know they're gonna get crowds, so they identify those specific dates where it's more restrictive. But I don't know that applies here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would your recommendation be to keep it to the downtown zone for now and see
I
how it
thi-
goes?
I think that would be most appropriate, and see how that plays out first.
Yeah.
The challenge that was
Right.
encountered on zoning through a number of applications was the risk that the downtown application of these kind of rooftop spaces was where you ran the greatest risk of noise, light infringement, what have you. But there was for sure interest outside of the central business district with Turconnell Park was the most recent application on Morrison River Road, where they have grills and a dog run. And now, granted, the density of that area, and as a result, risk for infringing light or sound, for example, was less. But wherever there's an opportunity, developers these days appear to be interested in finding some way to offer it as an amenity of sorts.
It's one thing to have an amenity for the dog runs and
Mhm.
seating areas for an apartment building. This is geared to restaurant and bar space
Hmm.
on the roof,
Right.
which is what I thought we were talking about.
Yeah.
But we can
I mean,
adjust it.
The use as it's been described, and again, a number of zoning applications that I've seen, is entertainment, right? It's not low-intensity individuals, couples, small families. The nightmare scenario is kids' birthday parties or, after-hours entertaining or whatever that might be. And what Summit had been lacking, and I think the hours is probably the missing piece, because there's a light ordinance in place, there's fire code in place to help kind of address those things. It was the hour of operations that was, really, if anything, missing, and that were not being consistently applied then. Kind of left to the recommendation of the operators that a use may have residential and commercial, and accordingly have a different application, more intense during the week or weekend. And we just didn't have a kind of a consistent standard to apply when considering variance relief.
Okay. And so maybe we should be providing for both, the typical bar scene
Mhm.
versus an apartment building that wants some amenity on the roof.
Yeah.
And I'm familiar with a couple of those in the city, and they work well, and they're quieter spaces.
Sure.
So why don't I put together that when we do this hopefully the final draft?
I think that's smart,
And,
because an apartment building rooftop, I mean, I've been to them, you've been to them. It's typically a grill and a table, and families go up there. I mean, if they really want to have a birthday party up there, it's up to the building HOA maybe to even allow that,
Yeah.
which they often probably wouldn't.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be a regular nighttime party scene that's going to wreck everybody,
yeah,
so,
And it's not,
yeah. So that's, having two different ways to look at it is fine. Yeah.
okay?
Sounds good.
Thank you. Do we need to take any further steps on this, that we're kicking it back to Joe? No, okay,
It's ultimately going to be a recommendation to the governing body
okay.
with respect
Yeah.
to introduction and adoption.
And Mr. Zucker, I just wanted to recognize too, I had an email exchange today with the Environmental Commission on this. to recognize for anyone who is hopefully watching us this evening at 8:30 from the Environmental Commission or the other boards, that this is, at least in my limited time here, the first what I expect to be an annual process of reviewing the DRO, soliciting input from a variety of different stakeholder groups. So in their instance, right, the EV ordinance is being pulled back in exchange for the model ordinance offered by the state, but doesn't preclude us from exploring modification as is necessary. So this is hopefully just the start of a recurring, regular process of review for which we're eager to invite input from the broader community. So,
Okay.
Thank you for that, Mr. Spur.
for sure.
Very true.
Everybody keep a list all year.
All right, so next up on our agenda is a discussion of the RFQs on our professionals. And for that, we're going to go into a closed session. Mr. Warner, I think, can explain a little bit of the process
Certainly. The open public.
before he excuses himself.
Sure, that's right, I will be, and perhaps Mr. Burgess will be excusing himself as well, I don't know.
Yes, before I excuse myself, could I just talk 1 minute about the league?
Oh, yeah, please, I'm sorry. Yes, you mentioned you wanted to give
A
us an
couple
update.
things. I appreciate Augusto going to the one that he went to. I was focused on affordable housing in the state plan.
Oh, did they address that at all?
The state plan was interesting because they had the players who were involved in the state plan there, and they swore up and down that the state plan is going to be released this week. Now, I'm thinking this is a 2.5-day week, so I'll take my bets on that. But it sounds like it's coming very, very soon. If not this week, I'm sure next week. So that's a good thing, because we need the information from that state plan to do all the cross-acceptance. Secondly, today, the DCA issued the mapping that will allow us now to complete the analysis for determining what our vacant land adjustment will be and the realistic development potential number will be. So that's 2 big steps in that direction.
Yeah, actually, the GIS mapping came Friday, I got my hands on it today, but and it also does a focus not only on the vacant land adjustment, which splits up the RDP and the unmet need, but the first step as well, it could inform certainly as to the accuracy or lack thereof of DCA's number on the land capacity factor, which is one of the 3 factors from which is derived the affordable housing obligation for every municipality, most importantly our city. And that's the one that the DCA is candidly admitting is a very broad guesstimate, literally from several 100,000 feet up. But we alone know what's really on the ground.
Yeah, well, the problem with as you said, there's 3 different components. The first 2 are very census-driven, so unless there's a mathematical error, we're not going to be able to adjust much there. But when it comes to this 3rd component, land capacity, we're finding already some significant errors. For example, in one municipality, and the reason for that is that they're using 2020 aerials. Well, in one municipality that we represent, there's 115 or so unit development. It's just completing construction, started in 2022. So in their maps, they're showing it as vacant property. It was in our 3rd round plan, so it gets counted for the 3rd round, and then according to DCA, it's going to get counted again for the 4th round.
It becomes
So we have to
220
really check all the mapping to see what's been approved and built following 2020 to see how we can reduce the number. Similarly, there are significant errors in the rehab numbers. For 2 quick examples, in one, like you, a high-income community, in the 3rd round, they had a 4-unit rehab obligation. And for some inexplicable reason, that jumped to 78 units with the 4th round. As we were talking about it, somebody said, in that town, if you have a If you don't have a sub-zero fridge and a wolf range, that's a deficient kitchen, so therefore. In another town, it went from 21 to 159.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of errors, obvious errors in there that we'll have to look at for you. And I guess that pretty much covers the main.
Yeah.
The
There
main
there may have been
points.
also some, if I may, there's some reliance with respect to land capacity factor on Mod Fort tax assessor records and designations that are not administratively prepared for this reason. So therefore, certain land may be listed as vacant. I think it's number 1 is the designation, whereas it may not be, or perhaps there's a string of lots that are associated with one master lot under common ownership. The first lot may be vacant, but they're all listed as one vacant, when in reality, they may not all be vacant. So and that was all recognized by DCA, including literally the people who did it, worked with the data sets they worked with. They recognized that very candidly at the sessions. And you know, they essentially said we did the best with what we were given and told to do with what we were, you know, the subsets and the data in the time provided. But there's an understanding it is far from 100% accurate. And it's incumbent upon municipalities such as ours to see where they were inaccurate, and if the magnitude of that difference can actually significantly impact the number that is required to be set forth in a binding resolution by January 31st.
All right, 3 months. 2 months.
Yeah, they whittled us down. They gave us the
2 months and a
number
week.
3 months and 10 days in advance, and then, which was the statutorily prescribed short time for us to deal with it, and then effectively took the most, not by design, I'm sure, but the most important data set, the mapping. We didn't get until almost a month and a half into that 3.5 month period. So yeah, our time is what it is.
Yeah, but the important thing is, we're going to be asking for a vacant land adjustment anyway. So, you know, we can accept their number, but in the resolution that the governing body adopts, it will say that we accept the number. However, just like the previous rounds, we're going to be seeking a vacant land adjustment. And we're going to try to figure out something about this rehab issue. The real critical concern, I think your number is 59.
59.
Let's make it 60 for the sake of the discussion. You're obligated.
50 is a round number.
Yeah. You're obligated to set aside the equivalent of $20,000 per unit for a third of that number. That's a lot of money. If your number is 6 rather than 60,
Yeah.
you know, you can see the difference that would involve. So that's critical.
If I may, the city may wish a two-prong attack, because the vacant land analysis certainly is critical. Once you have a net number from which to divide what is the realistic development potential and must be actively addressed with units versus what is the unmet need and can be more passively addressed, say with overlay zones or other mechanisms. But before you get to that net number, one has to address by January 31st the gross number. And if the gross number is somewhat significantly more than the net number, perhaps it's best to see if we can reduce that gross number to the lower net number, and then bifurcate that lower net number between realistic development potential and unmet need. At least in my opinion, no need. They're not mutually exclusive. You want to do both if you can, if it's worth it. Lower the number and then split it up as best we can between realistic development potential, which is a more difficult process, and unmet need, which is less difficult.
All right, thank you. So we're going to move on now to our RFQs. And for that, we're going to go into closed session.
And I can offer a very abbreviated, even for me, especially for me, a very abbreviated motion because it'll be a motion to go into the executive session
Executive session.
pursuant to the contracts and personnel exception to the Open Public Meeting Act, and the minutes of the executive session will be released when the need for confidentiality no longer exists. That is the motion.
Can I hear it? Yes, so moved?
So moved.
Second? Heard Jennifer moving, I
I said so.
thought. Okay, yeah.
All those in favor?
Yeah, aye.
Any opposed?
All right.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Have a wonderful
Thank you, guys.
Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Make sure the recording is shut off.
Yes, I'm telling them that.
Okay.